welcome back, everybody. Episode 42 of the Leonis Report. JB and I back again for another week of new content, literally new content, where we had the live stream last night, and we're going to obviously talk a lot about that. But before we get to that, just a quick hello, man. How you doing? How's the Monday starting off?
Doing good. I was pretty excited for the live stream last night just because we have like some global specific stuff, like some, new stuff for us that hasn't been seen before over on the JP side. So that's always a fun thing. We don't know how much longer we're going to get those kind of things now that we're kind of more or less on the same timeline, the same dev team working with us. So it was good to see kind of a big crowd there in the stream last night and see some familiar faces. And I think the overall reaction was pretty positive. How about you? What did you think?
I would agree with that. I liked it too. I mean, I was pretty happy. There's like think mid 400 viewers on YouTube at one point. I'll be honest, the comment section was actually much healthier than I think it had been in live streams past. There wasn't as much trolling and shit talking, if you know what I mean. There's a couple, but they've done some good stuff lately. They fixed the Android crashes, from what I can tell, so that's a really obviously nice thing. I think a lot of people have enjoyed some of the like timing of units being released and just some of the drop rates. Obviously, it's going to ramp up here in a second. I think people are going to get burned again real quick with the, we had 2 units this week, and I was surprised 100 cost this week, and then we're going to come back into another collab that might be announced tomorrow on the JP live stream. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming that people might get into that FOMO mode again. But at least we're getting some fun things shaken up with the meta. But specifically back to the live stream, it was enjoyable. I think it slowed down for me when they played that little mini game of like pasting the things. That was a moment where I had to kind of like, all right, I'm going to bed.
It was funny. It just went a little bit too long, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And uh, they do obviously like. I love the whole team for what they do, but even like the translator was getting a little tongue tied with the rules at one point, where I remember just sitting there being like, I don't know what's going on, and like this is like taking too much to focus on right now.
Yeah, I've never had seen that particular game before, but I don't know. It seemed like there was some lag between like Justin's instructions and what they were doing, so that made it pretty difficult for him.
Yep.
But also kind of added to like the little made it a little funnier, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely did for sure. But they dropped some big news. We're getting Oberon, the Auspicious. I know I was sitting there. They were taking some guesses as to who the unit was going to be. I would have never guessed Oberon. I don't think most people would have. Are you shocked by that announcement, by the character pick?
I was completely shocked because I thought that, and I'd seen a lot of people talking about this, that everybody was just assuming that June was going to be coming in as the Lunar New Year unit. We had gotten kind of like the teaser silhouette, like a month or two ago,
Yep.
and it seemed like everything was lining up to this, that this was going to be June, but now it just seems like that is going to be maybe our anniversary, like the global anniversary unit here, and that's coming up in 7 weeks or so, 8 weeks.
Yep.
Not too far away. So as far as Oberon, no, I don't think anybody saw that one coming. But it's a pleasant surprise. I've as much as I dislike some of the things that he did in the story, I still like him as a character overall. So it's cool and he's also a unit that hasn't had an alternate version yet. So I like that as well.
You hit the nail on the head for me with that last part. That I'm getting a little worn down with the amount of copycat not, or iterations of units. It's cool if you do one or two for a special occasion. Obviously, it's fun to see a beach version of your favorite unit, but they're starting to just like randomly introduce new lore units for like Jaden the Celebrated. Like that didn't need to be a character. Even Bridal Alliance did not need to be a character. I kind of understand Mont going from the base Mont to the King Mont. That's a pretty drastic character change. Even the Knight of Ruin Stern to like a regular Stern. But I feel like they're really reaching as of late for some of these like other versions of characters that just kind of don't need to be made. It feels kind of like a cash grab, and it I kind of feel like the ffbe power creep coming on, where you just get like iterations and iterations of characters that just continually drive the power creep, and that's not a good feeling. I like a new unit coming out because it feels like a new unit, not like, oh, another Wrath. That's why I remember when Winter Wrath was announced. I remember specifically being like, we already have Wrath like in the meta everywhere right now. Like I don't want to see her again at the moment. And yeah, Oberon was
Yeah.
definitely a surprise.
No, and that's a good point because especially when we just got Ralph a few months before that, maybe you want to see an alternate version of somebody that really never was in the meta, like like an Oldoa or a Yerma,
Yep,
or some of these really old units that just never got to do anything. So
totally.
I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Oberon coming in as a fire unit was also pretty surprising because a lot of us just pulled A2, so obviously that's not what we want to see. Like 2 weeks later is
No,
a brand new fire unit coming in. So
no.
that's kind of interesting.
I'm a little surprised, but not that surprised because Fire obviously got a ton of love last year. There was just a barrage of Fire units. Not all of them hit though, admittedly. So despite the overabundance of units, if they're taking another crack at it, I think the only thing I'm looking for here is how he differentiates himself. And we're going to talk through that right now, so we can take a pause here to highlight what we know about
Yeah.
him.
I was surprised not to see that the news dropped today. Like usually the news after the live stream comes in and fleshes it out a bit more. So unfortunately we didn't get that today. So we pretty much just have the what they shared with us last night. So
Right. So yeah, 100 cost unit. I know some people love that. Some people hate it. It's just I've come to accept that at this point, particularly because the 90 cost units tend to underwhelm. So at least if I'm getting a unit, I want it to be a good unit. But then again, if you release a billion good units, then you get a character like Soul who still gets power crapped even though they're good units. So I don't know how much that argument holds up, but they gave him the unique main job, Blade of Dawn. We'll circle back on that in a second. I know the big thing that most people looked at, myself included, I know you can extrapolate a lot from this, is the sub jobs of Dragoon and Paladin. That these were both fairly underwhelming for sub job options, that historically the abilities on them are not good for the modern state of the game. There's nothing really unique about them. And I know for me, when I look at these sub jobs, I look for what their passives potentially are, for what they contribute, and Paladin's passives are very bad. I think it's just like Holy Knights, whatever. It's the HP and defense, very bad. The Dragoon one, the only one I like there is the one that has the healing power with the HP. I know a character like Summer Glaciella has that. It's actually come in handy. I know Oberon does have an element of self heal, so that healing power passive might go into the fold. But we're not starting on a good foot there. I don't know what your first impressions
yeah.
on that were.
No, I mean I feel exactly the same way. I think that's how most people feel when these original jobs, they're kind of due for another overhaul, and specifically with the passives, that was something that never got touched originally when they did that sweeping kind of review of the old jobs. So yeah, I think it's kind of starts him a little bit on the wrong foot. Of course, with Paladin, you do hope for him to maybe get courage in there. That could be, the physical barrier also could be in there. That's another still like relevant, kind of decent skill. But at that point, those old buffs are also taking precedence, or you have to turn something off from the main job, which with the way the buffs are now, it's
Yeah,
not something that's ideal. So
exactly.
you really you're kind of dipping in there for one or two skills that are kind of underwhelming usually.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah, totally. At this point, the sub jobs have proven their most value with alternative buff options. The alternative attack options typically, or I got that backward. I'm sorry. Sub jobs are typically known for their offensive capabilities that they add to the main job to say supplement something. Maybe like a soldier sub job that has the guaranteed hit and the protector move. Like that's not something that every main job has. But most buffs on the sub jobs are now power crept to a degree that, yeah, the fact that Dragoon and Paladin have both bad buffs and bad offensive abilities compared to a main job. Not a good thing. Then again, there's obviously workarounds for that. That maybe they just make a really good Blade of Dawn main job. That's totally on the table too. I know a unit like the new Veritas of the Wind that just came out. I was just looking at building him, and I know like his sub jobs underwhelm me personally. He's got the Pugilist, and I think it's the Paladin also. And I even know like Bronwell, it's the same thing. Bronwell literally has Dragoon and Paladin. That you just really hope for like a main job to be gangbusters and a really good unique main passive. Totally possible, but you're starting negative here.
Yeah. So we'll see how it turns out. I think it's supposed to come out on Thursday this week, and in terms of like what they teased for the kits, we got the limit burst, a diamond AOE. So you like to see that in terms of like the large area of effect. It's going to have a pre-damage dispel on there, which is also very nice to have that in such a large area. And then it is also a guaranteed hit. Those were the two effects that they teased on it. I don't know if it's going to have any more, but even if it's just that, that sounds pretty strong.
And did I misinterpret this? Is the party buff on the limit break? Did I put this in there correctly?
That one is just, yeah, that's just his separate skill. Like that's his party buff that comes as part of his main job. At
Got it.
least from what they were saying. Yeah.
Got it. So I did put that. All right. So that is not attached to the limit break. I misinterpreted that. A second. Yeah, at first glance, that's a good limit break. Obviously, general dispel is very very handy. I obviously run into the question if we look at the limit break range. I don't know if you can all see it very well here, but you're talking what 5 squares away, a little bit shorter range. It's one of those things that you wonder by the time it gets close enough to use this, or the dispel, or are the buffs faded already? But then again, there's a lot of characters that do have mid fight buffs or mid fight haste on a limit break that I still think this is a very very good limit break. The guaranteed hit obviously is fantastic. That it just will take care of some of those pesky evade units that have been kind of a thorn in our side as of late. With that don't have nullify sure hit.
And we don't have a lot of characters in fire that have a general dispel. So, having that I think is pretty helpful.
It is.
The part go ahead.
I'll say the one that comes to mind is Regal Glaciella, who has not seen the light of day in quite some
Yeah.
time. But yeah, fire otherwise is lacking in that area.
Party buff seems pretty decent too with the unit resist. We've been seeing a lot of units get that lately, so it's I assume at 100 cost unit that'll match the 25 unit resist we've seen on, Astrius and Zidane, Celebration Jaden as well. And then a 3-hit barrier. They said all damage, I think, in the live stream, so that should be, I think, a 3-hit general barrier.
Nice.
So sounds pretty good.
I'm okay with that. The thing for me is still I'm comparing this to units like Helena and Vivi, where those teammate buffs are stacked with some really unique mechanics, and obviously A2 comes to mind too, where you have like 3 or 4 abilities on a teammate buff as opposed to just 2. That I'm actually slightly underwhelmed by this party buff. That it seems a little commonplace at this point, which is kind of crazy because that is a good buff, but you have to compare it to what other units have, and this is not what most units have as of late.
Yeah, like if you think about Astrius, his is giving him the innate courage removal on hit. So
right. Yeah,
a little bit pale in comparison there.
I would agree. They did give him the his EX upgrade or his EX attack here. It's a increase of defense pen. I would imagine 40 for 3 turns upon attack. I love these abilities that grant you defense pen mid fight. A lot of these characters or older characters had defense pen to start the fight, kind of looping back on before it. That'll fade halfway through the fight. The fact that you can constantly reproc that to maintain the damage uptime, I think is a significant upgrade. Dispel Protect, obviously very, very nice that you can just get rid of any of that's on a tank. And here's the absorption of the damage dealt that I was talking about. That I do like these where, we'll talk about this later on, but you don't always have a guaranteed healer anymore. So characters that have a little bit of self-sustain to increase their effective, HP in a way. I like this a lot.
Yeah, we don't know if this one is we don't know exactly which attack is on. They didn't actually display this one in the live stream. They just mentioned the effects. I'm assuming that this one is probably single target, just because the job 25 that they teased is also a large diamond AoE. Yep. So I'm assuming this one is probably single target with the Dispel Protect.
I can see that.
So, but the job 25 sounds like kind of the marquee ability. Again, the diamond AoE, they're gonna debuff the slash and magic res penetration of the enemies. We've seen that coming in at 40%, like with Howlet. So this guy actually, he seems like kind of in a similar vein as Howlet in a lot of ways, with the general barrier, with the debuffs here, yep, the absorbing damage on attack. So kind of like a fire Howlet in a way. But they did say this has a sequential effect where this one's a buff, kind of like what Ferris does, and it's going to buff. They didn't mention. I don't know if it's going to be just one teammate or the whole area around him, but whatever that is, it's going to raise their slash and magic res. So kind of gives you a nice synergy with the debuff that he applies there.
Definitely, I thought immediately of Howlet as well, particularly because we've seen Howlet come up a little more now with A2 as of late. That we've seen some more impact of his slash and magic res in peril, or penetration in peril. It actually does work fairly well for Vivi and Helena, who do get to a very much above average levels of magic res pen. This will honestly shut down most other magic units as well, because again, if you figure they set the bar at like, anywhere from, I don't know, 40 to I think 80 VV can get up to. Most magic units are only like 20 to 40, so this is going to doubly affect most magic units. Obviously, just falls apart when you consider that Howlet is magic oriented in his attacks, and he's got the magic ability also on the main job, that he's got some attack variability. If Oberon is just locked into slash attacks, obviously it's going to come down to what his slasher as pen also is, and he will also be privy to these kind of penetration debuffs as well. So kind of a double-edged sword in some of those matchups.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds interesting. I like Howlett's kit, and this one lining up to be in that similar vein. You can kind of theory craft some nice partners for him, maybe within the fire element. You could also look into, his weapon is katana, so
Yes.
right now, we have really it's just Astrius and it's Sephiroth are the only two units of note, kind of within that, but we do know about Dario coming along, and of course he is the wind element, and that's kind of the sister element to fire. So,
Yep.
you think about maybe throwing on a Dark Tetra card onto Oberon, and then you have, Dario out front tanking for you. Sounds like it could be what they intended, when they were designing him.
Absolutely. I have no doubt this lines up exactly with Dario coming out. I immediately got flashbacks to like Flagbearer, Glaciella, and Sorrow being released, where you talked about the original fire and wind meta and that synergy. Obviously, water is way stronger nowadays than it was back then, so I don't think that wind and fire will be as oppressive as it was a year ago, because water has way more counterplay options to mingle with ice today than it did back then. But yeah, I think they're doing a good job in terms of that synergy. And I agree that there's a lot of synergies within fire. I actually think this is a good time to segue into the vision card, because the vision card is greatsword, katana, bow, and staff devout. And I know immediately coming to mind, greatsword, I'm thinking of Hyo. Katana obviously is Oberon. Bow is Setia, who is um, got some theory craft love as of late. It's not strong, but Setia is among one of the better bow units, and staff devout is Soul, and Shells also. So there's immediately some amazingly great fire synergy there. This vision card, though, I'll just recap again real quickly. It's attack up. We're assuming 60% for that attack percent. Critical hit rate should be, I think we said either 16 or 20, something in that ballpark.
Should be 20. Yep.
Yep. And then magic attack res, I'd imagine something similar, 16 to 20.
Yeah, that should be 20 also.
Got it.
Should be 60, 20, 20.
So maybe not necessarily a strong candidate for a main slot vision card. Obviously, it's none of the stats that we really like to hunt for. But then again, even the sub slot still brings a lot of value. I'm tempering expectations on this, because the bestowed effect is the agility up. Like, that's okay. We normally like to see the unit res or the area res, but at least it brings it for Oberon to bring that area attack res up, and that's at least something. So I'll wait to see the more details.
It does have the hollow dual effect for area res as well.
Yep.
Those, as far as I've seen so far, seem to be like at 50% of like a main party effect. So 10 or 12% probably going to be for that. And
I
then
like it.
also area attack res up for Oberon if he's holding the card, which is nice too.
Yep.
I don't know. These hollow cards are so expensive that,
Yeah.
when you're not seeing like a primary card, or do you really want to dump, potentially 25, 30K? It's really, really tough.
Right.
If you're like a big fire person and you're going for Oberon, probably you want to get the card, but for other folks, I don't know.
Yeah. Even
Because the thing that I was thinking of is like, we do have the near card coming in. I don't know if we're going to get it this week or next week, but we're going to be getting that, within the next couple of weeks. And it's also a katana card, and it has almost literally identical effects on it. It's got magic res, it's got attack,
yep.
and then it has dex, which essentially replaces the crit there. So
Yep.
obviously it doesn't have the greatsword, the bow, and the staff devout on it, but if you're a katana, copium person, then you have a free card coming in.
Absolutely. I mean, and dare I say, I always think this too. Like, Ifrit is just not. It's not a far off comparison, The magic res is obviously topical at the moment, but not always applicable. That's damage type resistance, particularly if it's a sub slot vision card. You're only getting 10 magic res, and you assume they can penetrate 40 to 80% of that. Like that's really a non-issue for many. We're at the point now where most people aren't getting put in the negatives from Helena's limit break anymore. The critical hit rate, nice, but I have a thought on this later that critical damage is not nearly as good as it could be or should be or used to be. So that, yeah, if you're talking about 27k Viz or just use Ifrit in the sub slot, I might just go Ifrit.
I mean, when I see the bestowed effect on there for agility, it could go two ways in terms of Oberon. Like he could be like exceptional in his speed, like similar to Shadow Lynx on ice, where she also got the bestowed
Yep.
agility on her card of 8% or whatever. And like her, she's super speedy. Or it could be like that's one of his deficiencies, and like they want you to buy this card now to get get him to like a above average agility.
I would tend to think that's the case. They have not introduced, other than Zidane, a fast character. That's not been a thing in quite some time.
We'll see how it goes. I think I have to skip this one. I think I have to either choose Oberon or the card, assuming Oberon ends up being good. And yeah, I can't afford to get both right now.
No, same. And just again, I think someone mentioned this. The JP live stream is tomorrow, which might be the new collab they're announcing. So it's already
Mm.
here. That should they announce a really great collab, we might be saving already again. And not to
True.
mention, right now we're really impressed by the near automata units. We're in that phase too that like if you're smart with your viz and you just save over the next couple weeks, might be able to buy out the shop a little bit if you're looking to reincarnate both of them. So like you talk about reincarnating A2 and 2P, or you can go for Fire Oberon and his vision card. I think I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Tough to get
Um,
them all by design.
it is. It is. But we do have some other upgrades for other Lunar New Year units, and more the merrier is one of them. She already got her MA2, so she's getting the 140 ability and the limit break upgrade. She's getting 20 slash res. She innately has only 5 slash res, if I recall. That this will at least like, I don't know, get her to a place where it's not easily imperiled and went up. 10 AoE res, you like to see it. That's kind of standard for the course. I don't know if it's going to change a lot, but it's a thumbs up. And the biggest thing is that the good health and happiness buff, is the teammate buff, is getting a re-raise seal to attacks. Now we don't know if it's to her teammates as well or just to herself. They didn't elaborate. That'll be a big difference if it's to teammates. That'll be enormous. But yeah, as a re-raise oriented unit, this is certainly a really good upgrade. And then just finally, before we give thoughts, limit break, pre-damage, barrier break, and wind in peril. And if the silence lands, which there currently is silence on it, it will debuff the man eater modifier as well. So kind of a offensive nerf to whatever the enemy is doing. But yeah, what are you thinking when you see this?
It's pretty good. Like I mean, this is a couple years old unit. She's a 90 cost. She already had the 20 slash res. It's okay. It's not one that you want to see on there necessarily, but it can, I guess, protect you from an imperil. The AoE res, we always like to see that. She had 10 before, so it gets her up to 20 out of the box. Not bad. And then her party buff, it's the one that gives like defense and spirit and the regen. It's going to add that the re-raise seal to the attacks. 100% agreed. If it's one like Vivi's, that it passes it as well to the party mate, I think that makes or breaks, how I feel about this upgrade. Because so far, Vivi's the only one that's had that capability. Zidane doesn't have it. Helena doesn't have it, with hers. So, and we've seen with Vivi that makes a big difference for that buff when he can pass that onto the tank, and the tank gets red out front, and all of a sudden you can't remove re-raise anymore. So hopefully it is. But otherwise, I think it's just it's decent, but not great. It's not. I don't think it's going to necessarily get her back into the meta because she's really looking at mono win teams. I think for the most part, like Glove, it's a decent group, but it still needs like some like a tank. It needs like synergy with some other groups to kind of pull it all together. And I don't see that quite yet. So another unit I think that could be waiting for Dario maybe to potentially be worked in as a niche pick.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. I mean, I think the glove units you would pick, she's just not one of them. The bulk isn't there. The offensive output isn't quite there. The sustain is kind of there with the regen and the re-raise, but I don't know how to fix this unit either. She came out with this niche during the light meta where she was this hyper accurate unit that we really needed at the time. Wind has obviously kind of covered that base right now with Glassy and obviously like some of the just general like other, I don't know, luck cards and units and how the balance of the game has changed. So I don't know if the niche that more fits is still there. The same thing with the spirit scaling attacks. You know, was really strong at one point. I think it still is, but I think a lot of people are gearing for spirit in the current meta. That I don't think she's blowing people up. And we looked at the magic res pen, and it's okay. Certainly less than the meta damage dealers. So I don't think it's going to do much for her, unfortunately.
I think her like being kind of built like initially when she came out, she was a little bit bulkier for that time.
Right.
She's not anywhere near bulky at this point. Like her HP is not good enough. The AoE res 20 is fine, but it's not competitive with, you know, the Ferrises and Hios and Sterns, you know, some of the characters that really rely on that. It needs to be much higher because of the debuffs that are in the game now.
Yep.
And she doesn't have any debuff weakening or anything to kind of protect it. So, you know, I don't see her making a huge splash. I do like the silence on the LB, but I think the LB needed to add some additional range or make it a bigger area of effect for it to be effective. So
Right.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, no, right now, just as a reminder, that limit break at the moment is a, 4 range, smaller, cross shaped AoE. That, yeah, normally, I don't highly covet Diamond as much anymore because I know the newer buffs that do damage reduction, the higher the size, is kind of like a counterplay to how much nuking power those once had. But when you talk about a status effect like Silence, I don't really care what the damage is. I want everyone landing in that silence of the diamond
Right.
AoE. Yeah. But yeah, I mean more. We'll see what happens. But we also have Resnick the Hoppy, who was a vastly underwhelming unit. And I joked about this a couple weeks ago that she died or she fell so Halloween Lucio could run. If you look at their kit, there is a lot in common with Resnick the Hoppy and Lucio, and it's a unit that the vision card stunk, the unit stunk. Um, but regardless, the MA2, 20% evasion, that's actually very noteworthy. That actually does get her into a much higher tier of where she probably should have been initially, quite honestly. That I recall if I was looking at the evade stats earlier, it gets her in the realm. I know it sounds crazy, it does. It gets her in the realm of like Yuffie and Sorrow and 2B within like 5% or so of innate evasion. The 10 man eater is nice. Um, any thoughts so
Yeah,
far?
the 20 evasion gets her to the top end of the game.
Absolutely.
Like I think I had her at like 82%, including that 82 raw evasion.
That's correct. 82 base, yeah.
So or 81, yeah. So that I mean that's you know that's like in that top echelon. There any of the top evaders are within that like 80 to 88%
Yep.
raw. And
Yep.
then I mean she has some agility. You know that she can add on in a passive. She's got a 25 evasion buff on her main party buff, the Rabbit Rondo. So she's going to be a very, very competitive evasion unit now, especially Earth's cards. Dagger, as a group, they don't have it yet. I mean, I think they have the Starlight Elena card that can give them some evasion,
Yep.
but not necessarily a card that you might want to run on her. But you know, the groundwork at least is a little bit laid there for Dagger to eventually maybe have be like an evasion job. But for now, she's going to be looking at Earth.
I think that's fine. Yeah. That being said, her 140 is also 15 unit res. I think that's certainly very, very nice. -3 hate. I love hate for a while. Kind of went to the backside because of the amount of select 2 and select 3 abilities. Then again, I've seen as of late, noticeably like Shadow Links on ice, how important that is sometimes. Where if you have an enemy that needs to pick 1 or 2 or 3 units, just the fact that you are at the bottom of that pecking order, I have seen come to work very, very advantageously for some of these units that really can't take an extra hit or so. The Rabbit Rondo upgrade, which is her teammate buff, is getting a Courage Seal. So she is now second in the game. Zidane the first. She's obviously a Courage unit. That's a fantastic buff for her. I guess same question here. Does it pass it on to allies? That would seem kind of impressive, but maybe. This is already a 4 buff ability, but you can make the argument that the buffs are fair to subpar. It's the kind of buff that repeats too, so there's some risk in how that works. But the Limit Break upgrade is getting a disable element as well, so it was a single target ability. It's a 38% unit in peril, 70 healing power down, and now will also potentially disable. I don't know the percent they would go with. I kind of hope 67%. Like, she's not a 97 faith unit, so if they came out with this, like, I don't know, subpar like A2 45% rate, I'd be kind of sad. But if there was 67% disable, I would really like that.
I think usually when it's just a single status, it's always 67% on the LB.
That's what I think.
Usually it's only goes to 45% when you have a double effect like A2 or Lucia, or I think there's only a couple examples, but I think that's pretty good. Like, her LB was already great. Like, it's a huge imperil with the huge, debuff of healing power. It's something she can only use once though, obviously, because it's a limit burst. But, disable is not something that people are gearing against whatsoever, right? Like, nobody is really, other than like the arithmeticians, like, if, but that usually only comes out like for an evasion unit. So,
right.
Um, not something people are really gearing against. So I do like that. The unit res, I like that as well. Obviously, for the Elia matchup, if she does manage to hit you, she can be fairly accurate. The unit res is something that you pretty much all the Earth units are getting nowadays, just for that counter matchup.
Yep.
Her weapon is also getting a small upgrade. It's getting a conditional attack increase, and it should stack with Trust Stone. So
yes,
because it is conditional.
That's right. Yeah, I like
So
that one.
That's pretty solid.
I would agree. Overall, I think Res is going to be much better. Is she going to be used a lot? I would venture to say no. And again, because I think she's just a worse version of Halloween Lucio. I don't see many places where she's better. Then again, maybe a disable is the difference. Where you talk about going to a fight with a unit in this magic or a higher faith oriented meta at the moment. Although I like the courage removal seal, courage has the one downside that you're at 1 HP, so you're very, very fragile. The amount of follow-up attacks that occur right now, even if you conceal someone's courage removal, if they get the follow-up attack, the courage removal doesn't really matter. And I think of units like 2P right now that has a lot of those follow-ups. Bart's obviously comes to mind. That and even Astraeus' Limit Break, that when you're a unit with re-raise, there's a fairly decent chance that they don't kill you after you've re-raised the follow-up attack. You would need to be like heavily reincarnated typically to get in a damage number that would kill a unit that just got re-raised. But a unit that proc courage, that follow-up attack is killing them. So like this is a little inferior to the re-raise seal, but still very good, obviously.
I have like some copium for like the utility that she offers. I think that she always had kind of this interesting niche of being missile resistant, but also kind of specializing in spirit. And they kind of really tied that into her vision card, or at least tried to as well. What I do like though is that she is able to AoE dispel re-raise in a cross AoE that also dispels haste, and then she does also dispel protect and seals counters, also AoE.
Yep.
And then like the healing power niche as well. Like, she has a couple skills that decrease healing power. So I think like the kit actually still is holding up relatively well for the meta.
Yeah.
In terms of the utility that she has, it's not like Resnick, where the kit is, looking a little bit more dusty. So I think that she could get some play.
I think so too. She's definitely much better. I remember we looked at her a couple weeks ago, and I remember having a holy shit moment where I saw how good the main kit was. I really saw this. I'm like, there's a lot of really good stuff here, and I'm actually kind of semi walking back my courage seal comment for a moment because I want to approach this from a different angle because I just remember this. Her courage buff is that she gets 40 slash res pen so long as the courage is in effect. So if you can seal someone's courage removal ability, they can't remove it on you. That's going to ensure the slash res pen uptime a lot longer. So she's got the 40 innately. I think she gets another 15 from the mastery ability. So you're talking 55, 10 from a trust stone, whatever from the vision cards. Like it's pretty solid. I like what this unit potentially could still do. The sub jobs I like a lot still. Obviously, you have potential to decrease accuracy to enemy. You have your own kind of courage remove on the Strider sub. There's a lot to like there.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to awaken her for sure.
I think I will too, just because I'm intrigued to see your work. And as far as dagger units go, it's pretty slim pickings. She's like kind of near the top of the list, to be honest, out of what you have available. That should you want to play with some dagger teams, Zidane obviously takes the cake. Resol slots in really easily for the win synergy between the two of them. Little Lila the Bold is still up there. Resnick might surpass her right now though with some of these upgrades. I mean, we'll see.
Potentially. But I mean, if the 3 out of the 4 units there on the top row all have courage, and Zidane also has the seal courage, but it is just for himself only. And like I was saying earlier, like with Vivi, we've seen the more units that get that buff and can increase your chances of landing that on the enemy before they hit you. That is really the key scenario. If they just have it themselves, you never know exactly how it's going to pan out in the fight, whether they're going to be able to apply it on the right unit, if they're going to be able to apply it at all. I like that. You also think about Bradley, also courage within his own element, in her own element.
Yes.
So
Yes.
she has that natural synergy as well. So yeah, I think I have some high hopes for based on this info.
I do too. Absolutely. Which yeah. So looking forward to that. We have another big surprise though that came at the end of that live stream, which was Gilgamesh winning the character popularity poll, and we got shocker number one with Oberon. I'm not gonna lie, I was shocked with Gilgamesh at number one for the poll. What was your response to that?
I couldn't believe that. I was just as shocked as you were.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people were shocked, but it seemed like there are a lot of Gilgamesh fans, and I'm one of them. I just never thought that he would win.
no, yeah,
He was one of my first units that I maxed out in the game. Back when he was so expensive to buy his shards. I committed to it, and I managed to build him up, and he was awesome for a long time. Obviously, he's just hasn't been good for a long while now, but I would love to see an alternate version of him.
me too. I think we joked at one time of seasonal Gilgamesh. Was it summer? And I was
Yeah,
trying to think, was it a surfboard across his back or something? We thought of something fun that like to
yeah,
replace.
like the mask was going to be like the scuba gear or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
something fun.
yeah,
Now, I mean, he's the title character. It's nice that he's finally getting that second version. He's obviously instrumental in the lore. His character arc is seemingly kind of finished at the moment, which at least on pause with the Realm Scourge. So I am intrigued to see how this season wraps up, what the future of the lore brings. Obviously, that might tie into whether or not he gets another version to say, like, I don't know, Gilgamesh the whatever. Although it's not a guaranteed unit because they did say that it was going to take into account JP's character poll as well. That at least they know that Gilgamesh is our pick. That should the opportunity ever arise, he's going to probably get that nod over other units. But it wasn't a slam dunk. It did sound like they were going to gauge the response from JP as well to determine what that future unit was. But I mean, the top 10, Helena was second. Not surprising. I'm so glad she wasn't first. I do
I
not
know.
want another
We already
version.
have 4 versions.
Yeah. Third was Venera, which I was shocked by, and honestly, she's worthy. I think of an up. Oh, she could be. She's still very lore prevalent, but she's really just a glorified babysitter at this point. She's basically just running around with a baby and not really doing anything. So I think it would be odd to give her this like hyper meta defining character at the moment, given that her role as a like warrior is kind of over at the moment.
Yeah, on pause, just
Yeah,
like Gilgamesh in the story.
right, exactly. But yeah, we'll see what happens. They did also announce though the roadmap for us.
And I love that they've been doing this every month now, and it's something that you know that we can kind of count on and look forward to what's coming over the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not a huge amount of foresight. It's not like they give away enough viz that you could suddenly switch whatever you're doing already. And it's we already basically know anyway. They know that we see JP. Why not just acknowledge it, make it a little more formalized? I like what they do with that. But obviously we're right now in the first week of February. We got 2P, we got Lucio, who we're going to talk about soon. The Vision card. Next week's Oberon, or I guess tomorrow is Oberon. The skill potions being added is a big one. We've got some questions on this about how to allocate skill potions. My answer's still the
Yeah,
same. Save for now. Save, but yeah.
yeah. I think at this point we just don't have enough of them to make really anything meaningful there. Once we have access to more of them, I think we can do a deeper dive with it.
Yep. The third week of February, the fourth week of February. I know that's likely what the water ketone, or I'm sorry, dark ketone and water links.
Yeah, that should be the third and fourth week there. Third week should be Lynx, and then fourth week Catone, the new 70 cost Ashen Warriors.
Yep. And then
The second week there, we're gonna get that should be this week. So we're gonna be seeing that near card that I was talking about earlier. And I guess we're also gonna be seeing Lucio's second card. He actually got two cards there, so I guess we can look at that one too while we're talking about him.
yeah. And then the last thing here is the Elder Awakening for vision cards. For those of you that aren't aware, it's apparently a way that you can power up your older vision cards that you already have. You can acquire a lot of the metals in the Mog shop to power them up. I don't know much about the intricacies of it other than there's some small percentage increases, but I think it's a really nice step that you can obviously take advantage of a resource that you own and further enhance it.
Yeah, the Elder Awakening is basically two components to it. There's the base stats of the card get upgraded no matter, after you awaken it, no matter which slot you use it in, those stats are better. And they're like 30%, I think, up to 50%, I think I want to say, better for the Dark Esper cards. Like the dark cards get bonus stats.
Cool.
And then the second component is if you use the card in the secondary slot, it gets increased efficiency in terms of the stat party bonuses. And that's generally about 20% increase.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. Obviously, anytime you have a new kind of power creep, I'm intrigued to theorycraft and see the actual tangible effects of how it affects things. The answer is usually not a ton, but like enough that it's worth the consideration.
The nice thing about it is it's going to be pretty accessible for most players. The currency in order to get it is in the vision meta shop for your vision cards, and I think you need like 175 currency in order to upgrade one card, which isn't too bad, I think.
No, I would
Especially with all the guild summons we can do now, that you can get that relatively easily.
absolutely true. Definitely, definitely. But yeah, on that note, we do have Lucio who came out this last week. We did not cover him last week just because I don't know if we didn't know he was coming. I think we did, but like we didn't really think that far ahead. Was he released at 2P and JP? I don't even know.
I'm not. They were released around the same time, but I don't know if it was the same week. But yeah, we just didn't think that he was coming yet. We didn't have the news quite yet.
Yep.
So yeah, we can circle back on him and give our thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know I did my character review a couple days on him, did that deep dive. I did end up pulling for him. I probably shouldn't have, to be honest, but there's enough about him that I can appreciate what they're trying to do for the long term, for what they're doing for Sword Warrior. That was really convincing for me as the job class, as a light unit. There's a lot there that I liked. Have you have any initial thoughts so far? We can kind of go back and forth on him.
He's a good unit. Like I think that there's not like a ton of glaring weaknesses, although there are a couple. I think you think about his accuracy is a little bit lacking. He does have some ways to shore it up. Like he does have a passive from Strider that he can pull in. I think that also does give him an accuracy buff potentially that you could pull in as well if you want to. I think he's pretty bulky. Like he's got a lot of alternate methods of mitigation that he can pull in. Like the most notably is going to be the elemental resistances. That's kind of his main source of survivability. And it's kind of like a light Sephiroth in that way, where Sephiroth had like the Omni resistance. Lucio's got that too. It is pretty cool that he can use his original sword from his 80 cost version as well and bring that up. So it's fairly easy to get him like around 30 to even higher if you use like an HP set for trust stones.
Yep.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Like the damage is pretty good. It's not blowing anybody away. The mitigation is good, but again, I don't think it's blowing me away either. I've been using him. I thought it was actually he would be bulkier than I've actually in my testing. That's been a little bit disappointing for me. But the damage is good. Like the utility is pretty good. He's got pretty good teammate buffs that he can pass out. He's got the barrier break. He's got the dispel on hit, which I think is the thing that I like the most about him. Yeah, what do you think so far?
Uh, I'm liking him more and more the more I look at him. When I first saw him, I was relatively unimpressed. Where a lot of very short range, not a lot of large AOE's. It's just one cross shape, and it's only 4 squares away. And the attribute effects, it's just 40 defense pen for 3 turns. I know I said I liked this earlier, but you usually get something else on ability like this too. But overall, it's okay. The limit break is certainly nice as a select 3 to decrease the CT, dispel protect. I like the brawler nature of him. I still am of the camp, and I don't say this often. He is a max reincarnate unit, though. Like, I see very obvious upsides to anyone that actually pumps reincarnations into him from the effective HP perspective. That he's a unit that has the 10 AOE res. He also has the 15 unit res, and then to your point, 30% plus on all element res is absolutely like scales disproportionately higher than most units. He's got the highest base attack in the game. So you talk about adding on another 180 attack. That the warrior class has that Minotaur vision card, which is that 60%. There's a lot here. He's also got on his main buff another 40% attack buff. That there's so much here that I think is just gonna lend itself well over time, because like, when is physical barrier break never gonna be good? It'll always be valuable to some degree. When is re-raise remove never going to be good? It'll always be valuable. Coverage removal, he's got all of it. The dispel re-raise is actually on a select too. So like, there's a lot of things here that I think will stand the test of time, even if they might not seem like it in the short term. I also appreciate that he's got some unique buffing sizes here. I've actually had some fun playing with some movement things here with the AoE buff that you can get 1 square away. His follow-up buff potentially is this diamond on the sub job. If you're playing into a light or a dark team, I like that they kept that about him as well from like the original anti-dark or anti-light view. I don't
Which
think
does stack with his all
all
element
elemental.
party buff.
Right.
So yeah, you'll
Exactly.
get up to like 30% of light and dark essentially if you use both.
Exactly. So I'm liking him more and more. And again, I think the game is going to change enough that he's going to still be okay. I think he replaces Winged Stern at the very least. I don't think he replaces Bart's. If anything, they're probably on the team together. Or he
Yeah,
take but
I
yeah,
think they're kind of meant to go together.
right.
Definitely.
As sword warriors and light units, there's too much not to like between the two of them. The only thing I had a concern of, and I'm actually most excited to play with, I had concerns about the slash res pen, because I think that's where we're kind of getting like the meh feeling on the damage output. That he's got the 40. It's really it, unless you go for the vision cards that um, Light has one, the 14 vision card. Sword Warrior technically has one too, but it still doesn't get to the height of slash res pen of some units that we're used to, particularly that he's got no innate imperils in the kit. You kind of combine both those together, ends up being lackluster, but I'm super intrigued to play with the Pearson Strike variation of this. I've not done that yet.
I think that's where it's felt a little underwhelming is like when I've played him with Bart's. Bart's has imperils, but they're just for himself.
Himself.
Like so it doesn't necessarily amplify what Lucio's trying to do. I had played around a little bit using King Mont as the tank for them, and he's got the diamond AoE slash imperil. A lot of people had tended to turn it off in the past, but I've always liked it. I liked it for the fire evasion team. I like it for this warrior team potentially too. And that made a noticeable difference in his damage as well. I don't know. There's something like I just haven't been able to find the true potential of him yet, and I feel like he's just going to be one of these building block characters where there's going to be another warrior, kind of the similar things that we were saying about King Eld. That's he's great now. He needs certain setup or he needs certain teammates to go with him to really shine, and I don't think we have that quite yet. Bart's is good. Helena is good. That trio I think is pretty good as a trio. I just don't think it's going to be that top meta team. I do think we potentially could see Lucio as a top meta unit down the road, if he were to get, somebody of that ilk, within Warrior.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, again, like current day, it's kind of whatever. But there's enough here that when you say like, will this unit last for a while? I see promise, and I think differently about his concept too with the re-raiser move and the carja move. My initial demerit against it or strike against it was that there's so much seal of that in the game currently. But the thing is, all the seal abilities are on first turn buffs, right? So they'll fade after 3 turns. What I think he's essentially meant to kind of do is he's got these crazy survivability buffs that he'll last easily those 3 to 4 turns, so that by the time the fight gets to a finishing round of attacks, those seal capabilities will have faded by then, and he'll still be in a good position to live and do damage. Most units can't live 4 or 5 turns into a Helena or a VV or other seal characters. He's one that potentially could. That yeah, come the last fight, that last attack, he takes it away. I think that's how it's supposed to go.
The thing that I've always liked about the Omni Resistance, it's something I always said about Sephiroth, is that helps you like stand up to multiple metas, shifting metas much better than some other damage types do. Where if you come in with a huge amount of AoE resist and suddenly the meta flips to a unit resist meta, we saw a bunch of characters get immediately had to shift out. Being omni resistant to all those different element types, well, that gives you a certain leg up in that type of scenario that maybe you can build him a little bit differently and he can then suddenly be like a chameleon for different metas.
It does. So I just had to remind myself. I knew Vivi had a typeless attack. That still makes me scared. I remember getting blown up by these. That's one thing that dark units are always good for. They're always good for one typeless attack. That I remember I had an OG Lucio like a year ago in the Joker meta, and I got him to like 95% dark res, and I went into arena and I got one shot by a Helena the Black Rose, the original Black Rose, the dark Helena, and I remember just being like, "What the fuck?" And I looked, and it's because like all three of them have like some kind of typeless attack. Even Dark Phoenix does too. That dark res just means nothing, and they bypass it. And so it's not a get out of. It's still got to work at it, but yeah.
Yeah, it does have the follow up attacks to worry about as well with the
Correct.
typeless non elemental damage.
100% true. Absolutely, absolutely. And he did come out with a vision card this week, and he's like we said, coming out with another one next week. We'll talk about that right now. This vision card, not the worst one, not the best one. For me, the 16 unit res is obviously underwhelming that it's at 16%. That kind of stands out, but still, we like to see that. 40% reaction block and 36% elemental chain res, not bad. Um, I don't have strong thoughts on this. I pulled it reluctantly because again, I kind of figured Lucio would be around for a while, and I knew this card was one of them to really like be a staple. But I'm not blown away by this card.
Yeah, it's okay. It's nothing great. I think that actually, if you got Lucio and you haven't pulled this card yet, I think you should probably get the one that's coming out this week. I think it's a little bit better in terms of like the overall picture, but this one's pretty good too. But probably one that I would maybe hope to pull later.
I completely agree. I remember that sticking out to me that the new one that's coming out, we'll circle back because this actually is a really good side by side comparison to see the two of them, is also a unit res card, which was obviously surprising to me that you'd have like two of the same attribute for the same job. But then again, this is a different class of sword unit, so this opens up a completely different set of doors. So that, yeah, I think this is very much superior that it's a 20% unit res. It's also the slash res pen that we were just talking about, not him not having. That to me, I think when this card comes out, it's going to be a different Lucio. You talk about the 40 and 8, now you get this 28, 10 on a trust stone passive. It looks a lot different. And then the 42 slash attack, which is a good mod on a main slot here. We usually like dink and dunk these kind of mods because they usually get relegated to the sub slot. 42 mod on a main slot here, though, that's substantial.
And I really love that this card is also for the Red Mage and Knight groups as well. Especially the Red Mage group, which didn't have a unit resist card yet.
Yes.
That was one of the ones that we've been waiting for. We pretty much were locked into using, the Dark Odin card for like the water and ice units.
Yep.
So this opens up a lot of new possibilities. I like that this card also has the 10 area resist bestowed. This one, yeah, I think it's hard to not compare them side by side and not immediately think this one is much better.
Yep.
But like, look at all the light units on there. It's pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy. It's basically all of them. It's not, but yeah, no, that's it. And that's I remember that thinking that too. Like this is definitely like a sub slot card once the other one gets introduced, which is still like okay. You'll still retain some of the reaction block and elemental chain res and the unit res, but still you also have doors open here that aren't open on this one. So when Sword Warrior in particular, like these would be foundational vision cards that 6 months from now I'd miss skipping on, if you know what I mean. Maybe not that long, but you know what I mean. A couple months from now, when we're in the Warrior meta, and I'm like, fuck, I wish I pulled that card.
We've kind of seen Gumi's pattern in terms of like they give certain elements and jobs attention one year and then they shift and then they do the next set the next year. And it seems like Warrior is probably going to be one that they're looking at this year.
Yep.
And this is kind of like the first building blocks of that. I did want to say though that, on that red mage front, I immediately look at Sylvie and finally
Yes.
now being able to like shift her into my water team and ice teams, like kind of building around that card. That was like, being locked into like ice water for red mage has always been pretty limiting so far, even though that's the majority of red mage is within those two elements. But now being able to pull in a Sylvie and some of these other units, I think is going to be pretty fun for team building.
Absolutely. So yeah, very much looking forward to some of the balance changes that these two cards bring together. And so that's everything that we had for Lucio in terms of what we wanted to talk about. We do have the Q&A now, which we didn't get to do last week because we ran a little long. So question number one, and I'll let you kick off with this. Do either of you have any thoughts on how Gumi or Square could improve the long-term financial health of the game?
There's a couple things. I don't know if it's stuff that they've looked at yet, but I feel like at least on the global side, I feel like that there was a better overall like health and feeling about the game when there was more than just like pack H's or bust. When they were offering like lower tier packages as well, because all the whales buy those lower packs too, in addition to like the bigger packs. But then you open up all the the minnows and even some free to play might be enticed to spend when they can get a $5 or $7 pack that has some good value. So I don't understand like the downside of offering those things more regularly. Why don't we have those every single month? A $7.99 pack. Why don't we have like a Fountain of Lapis like ffbe has that gives you some of those daily perks? I don't know. I think that some of those lower things would definitely help. Other things could be, maybe alternate skins for units. That's something I've heard people talk about in the past. Kind of like cosmetic items could be another potential way. I don't know, just a couple off the cuff things. What do you think?
Pricing wise and like strategy wise, I think that makes perfect sense. My biggest fear and concern is that right now our player base is still dwindling. We are absolutely shrinking. And so no matter what you talk about from like a pricing perspective, you're talking about pricing your current player base who's already kind of tapped out. So if you're talking about increasing the long-term financial health, if you were to say like make cheaper packs, I don't know if that would solve it, because if people are already maxing out their spend, yes, the whales will get those cheaper packs, but uh, it's not the road I want to go down anyways. The road I want to go down is I think this game deserves and needs something from Square to push it to reopen the doors to the audience of Final Fantasy fans. That's not par for the course with gacha games, though. They typically don't reinvest in bringing like the limelight to them. They have a shelf life. They streamline the operations like we're seeing right now, and they just kind of let the whales run the operations. They'll do a collab where you like oh my god, right now the near collab, there's so many people on Reddit like, hey, I just came back and I just re-rolled and I just did this, and like these every 3 months you get a collab that brings in an influx of money. And that's kind of the business model. So I'm being hopeful, but like I still maintain like if I dressed up as Mont Leonis and went to a Final Fantasy convention, no one would know who the fuck I am. Like the amount of like non-exposure of this game to the Final Fantasy player base in general is so minuscule that I feel like they just need to do something to broaden that. That could be like a simplification of some of the game too in terms of the menu layout. There's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of materials, a lot of stuff 4 years now in. They're doing a really good job right now in terms of like eliminating the Esper resonance and the unit affinity, where like some of those small things that would trip up a newer player, now they can just like go right in and not worry about any of those small things. So I think more of those quality of life things in conjunction with like a bigger like marketing push and maybe like revamp of like I don't know, Final Fantasy influence, I think that's how you improve the longer term financial health.
I think in terms of like the meta game, it is a good time to bring in new players because essentially their approach with the newest characters is that they've invalidated like the year 1 through 3 units, and it's really we're playing with a pool for the most part of like the units in the past 6 to 9 months. So that is the time to bring in new players where they don't feel FOMO that they don't have those old units, those old cards, because it's most of the new stuff that's being used. I think that they also need to bring back Final Fantasy Tactics. Let's be real, like the majority of us that play this game, that's why we came, and that's every day people talk about
Yep.
where is Tactics, why isn't it back? A lot of people will come back for it. Hopefully that'll be the news in the live stream in JP. We'll see.
Oh, can you imagine? Good one. That's good. Good question because it is. It's you need to be pragmatic about it too because not you can throw pennies in a wishing well and say I want to do this and do that, but like you gotta kind of be real about it too. All right, this is a fun one. I actually did some prep for this question. Of all the mechanics in the game, which, in your opinion, is the most outdated and/or flawed? I'll let you start because mine might go on for a while.
There's a few of them that immediately come to mind. The first one for me is the dexterity
Can
statistic.
you shut the fuck up? That's exactly what I did. I have a spreadsheet prepared for it. Oh my god! All right,
All right, so I won't elaborate on that
no, no,
one,
please
but
do, please do, please elaborate.
well, I just feel like the ceiling essentially on dexterity, I think, is where a lot of like the year 1 units were. And then some, I mean, I'm not like a huge math guy, but I do know that when it gets above like 350-ish, it just falls to the floor in terms of its effectiveness, especially for accuracy, which I think for crit and some of the other things, it essentially is better. But when you compare it to like a stat like luck or agility, where you're just getting value no matter as high as the stat will scale, it's not the same for dexterity, and it really is another one of the reasons why missile units have really fallen off, I think, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I still hear thunder.
No, that good. That means like we're onto something. Yes, I completely agree. So this is what I prepared, and this is as high level as I could keep it for people. So you're right. So dexterity has two components to it. One of them is what it does for accuracy. The other is what it does for critical hit rate. So we'll talk about accuracy first. And the way this curve is that obviously there's much like accentuated slope in the lower dexterity amounts, which is what you're seeing on the lower x-axis here. Like if you were to get like graph this over dexterity, just as an example, if you go from 240 dex to 300, that's an 8% accuracy increase. If you go from 460 to 540, like way higher, it's only a 6%. So we've said this before, there's diminishing returns the higher you get here. And, it's only 2%, not a huge deal, but that's still not all that impactful. I don't see the upside of really pumping in dexterity when you know that you're not getting a whole bunch on that stat for what you could otherwise. And the same thing is kind of true for crit as a crit hit. And it's not as steep. It's still relatively the same, though, that like you have diminishing returns over time. And the fact of the matter is that if you have to get a unit to 540 plus dexterity, it's really not a huge increase compared to like 500 or 460. It's an extra, let's say, 12%. The bottom line is that for missile units in particular, where their damage also scales off dexterity, it's not enough. They've been power crept that they're giving out 40% dex on their attacks to like almost every unit. That's a lie. There's a lot of units that have 120% attack. But if I use the comparison of like Young Eld, he's a Pierce user. His abilities scale off 40% dex. It's kind of unfair in my opinion that missile units rely on that, and he gets it for free in his abilities. That there's just something here with dexterity. It's all these things, all of them underwhelm. And I even talked about this earlier in the week with missile reincarnations. That if you look at what they give physical damage units, they give them 56 dexterity. Missile units get 70 dexterity. They get 14 more dex. You know what 14 dex does in all of this? Nothing. Doesn't do more for damage, doesn't do more for accuracy, doesn't do anything for crit. It's completely underwhelming. And even the trust stones, if you look at the set bonuses for dexterity, I think it's what 15% dex. Like there's literally no benefit to maximizing your dexterity. And we're at the point now that even when you look at units that have like exceptionally high base dexterities, you know, these missile units that are, let's say, 250 to 270, if you were to take a 35% vision card and put it on like a main slot, 35% dexterity, they're getting, let's say, 84 to 90. Well, when you drop down to, let's say, like this 200 range, these characters getting 73 dexterity. So you're talking top tier base dex units versus at like okay, average ish dex units. You're talking a difference of like 11 dex on a 35% dex measure. Like 11 dex means squat. So I can't tell exactly what the answer is, but there's something wrong with the mechanic that hasn't aged well. And in particular for critical hits, because I've been a big proponent of trying to increase crit damage for the modifiers. And I think there's been so much power creep from a modifier perspective. Like vision cards now have higher modifiers on them than year one, but they never updated the 25 crit damage. That's always been 25. So what started off as like, 20 extra mod used to be really good, and now we're getting cards with 42 mod on them. Dex, like the crit hit modifier has diminished over time. So there's just something with that system that I think is vastly not okay. That took a lot to get through. Hopefully it made sense, but the fact that you and I were both talking about it means there's something.
Yeah. I mean, kind of on this, so kind of staying with the missile units, I think another thing that's really kind of gone wrong over time has been the whole mechanics around range and range heights, where you have your missile units who are fragile, they get one shot very easily. Their real advantage to the game is being able to hit from a long range. And typically those units, if you use their range passives and things, have about 8 to 9 range at their very maximum. There are some units who can get longer than that, but typically you're in that 8 or 9 range. And then you look at a unit like Helena, and those units, you don't want them walking forward. You want them just to be maintaining that 8 range. So you're not even counting their effective movement into that range. But then you look at a unit like Helena, who is A, more survivable, B, does way more damage than any missile unit, not even close. It's like an absolute joke. And then you add to the fact that she's essentially equaling their range with her movement plus her 6 range diamond AoEs.
Correct.
That also have this incredible range height of up to 4 with with the AoE. So that is another thing where I think the devs have completely gone off their rocker in terms of range and range heights on units like Alaya, on units like Black Rose, that have affected specifically missile units in a big way.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think it's at the point there really should be a game balance change, that they do a mathematical overhaul of those two equations. They accentuate the curves for the higher amounts of decks in the game currently. Maybe they do something in terms of like, God, I don't even know what you could do. Like the trust stone set bonus, like overhaul that stone in particular. And then I would imagine, like for any missile unit or some kind of applicable unit, that they change the calculation of the attacks. But right now, it takes 40% of their decks. Make it higher for those units in particular if you're going to really like lean into that aspect of it. Something inherent in the game has to change, though. It's not just like a vision card tweak or like a new character.
I was going to add in casting time too, but I think we've gone on long enough.
You're right. Beat a dead horse. So the third question, kind of similar, circling back to the first question, the idea of rotating exchange shops. Many other gacha games do this. Why can't wotv? We're into year 4. There's no reason for old units or VCs not to be in the shops to help new players. I'll start with this. I know you started in the last clip too. I completely agree. I play a bunch of other gachas, and yeah, the shops every month. It's like a new set of units, a new set of something, or even daily. It changes what reflects there. Right now, like the only thing you really have that rotates is the daily element on the shop. Like you can buy shards, but it's not at a discount. It's really not at anything. It's just an extra chance to like purchase shards straight up. But from an exchange perspective, like they changed the friend medals and the guild medals like once. I think it's like 2 years ago at this point, and it was really welcome at that time. It was Ketone and a couple of the units that I can't remember because they're not good anymore. But yeah, there was a time where like it was valuable. The fact that they don't rotate that more regularly, I would agree. I don't think it's very new player friendly.
The whole, I think we've talked about something similar to this in the past, but I think that the whole sort of backlog approach that they have right now in terms of for newer players or or people who've been playing for a few months, they hit that wall where they need to they've got their team built up, and then they start going towards the old units and say, oh, I want to get this character to fill in that niche that I need for my team. Crap, I can't build anybody up because I don't have any way to get any shards. It's I just got to grind this guy in my barracks or my hard quest, and I got to do that for months essentially. I don't understand why they artificially limit the shards for Viz. Like, if I have 100,000 Viz, why can't I just go in and buy 600 shards for the normal price? It
Yeah,
makes absolutely zero sense why they don't allow people to spend the Vizior that they have. Um, I'm sure that there's some player retention research that they did that's somebody that pushing paper, said was good. But I don't agree with it whatsoever.
no,
I think that you're going to annoy more players than you actually keep around for that specific feature. Um, I don't know.
no, I'm with you because I think we're past. I think we're past the life cycle of the game from like there's usually like a hill climax and then your downtraw. That FOMO is no longer truly efficient from a monetization and like perspective of making people pull. People will pass on things now. They have to pass on things. People are tapped out after spending for 3 years. They cannot spend within their budget anymore. That I think you're past the point of like we're gonna limit certain characters and vision cards because we want to keep the FOMO there so that when the cards come around, people pull for them that week. And I don't think that's good at this life cycle in the game anymore. It was for a time, not anymore.
Yeah. It makes no sense for those year one, year two, even year three stuff. Like, we're well beyond any of those really being FOMO for anybody. It's more of people trying to get to a competitive spot where they can maybe compete with some of the higher end guilds who have built everything up, over time. So yeah, I think that those daily elemental shops should be enhanced. Not only should they be more than 5 shards, like put 40 shards in there for each character, that
Right.
you can get 40 shards a week for now for each unit.
Yep.
And then yeah, now you can make a significant dent over the course of a month. But I've also always said put the vision cards in there as well, the non-limited vision cards. You should be able to buy the same amount of buy a shard pack each week for those as well. So I don't understand why they don't do it.
Completely agree. So the last question was one that you brought up after editing last week. It was an observation you made that in our tier list discussion last week, there was an overall trend of dedicated support units going into mid-tier status. Raising the question, is the dedicated support unit still valuable and votive? And I'll remind everybody what the tier list did look like. We have Shells in our S tier.
Velis and Sylvie and B and A.
Yep, Velis and Sylvie and A, but even Sylvie, I would contest, is not a dedicated support. Most people turn off the majority of her abilities to force her to be an offensive AI with a TMR and a limit break option to heal. But other than that, there is some fall off there that I think our B, we have Ayaka. There she
Lena's
is.
in there.
Lena's in there.
Resnick.
Yep.
Renoa is a little bit kind of on the line.
Yep.
Then even like a couple in C, like Aerith and um, like Halloween Leela is in there as well. Eldyra.
Right.
So, I mean, I had some thoughts. I mean, I brought up the question just for the debate, and I had some thoughts about what my opinion was. And when I answer the question at face value, is the dedicated support still valuable in War of the Visions? Yes, they are. Is the dedicated healer still valuable in War of the Visions? That I think is the distinction when I look at this list. And when you think about a character like an Ayaka, even like a Lena, that's their primary function. They do have some buffs and things, but it's really they're more about the instant heals and kind of the big heals that they're bringing. Even Resnick is the same. So, but when you look at a character like Velis, he's got the haste, and he's a lot more of an offensive threat than some of the other units, and he's kind of got that double threat thing going on. Same thing with Sylvie, like you mentioned. Shawls is really kind of the outlier there, where she's not really even a healer. Like, she does have some healing components, but it's just that her buffs are so OP, and that the buffs in particular are OP for the meta that we're in right now is what makes her so good. So my thought is it's more about the buffing really at this point than the healing, because healing has been replaced by all of these sustain abilities, and there's other ways to get the healing in now than we've had in the past. And that's kind of my feeling on it.
You know what? I agree, and I think you made a great distinction. We talk about it in Overwatch all the time. Those the FPS, they call it the support role, not the healer role, and that's been a big thing where a lot of people focus on the healing aspect of what supports can do. But they're called support because they're literally more than just the healing. And I would agree with you. I am personally very much biased in a lot of the role compression that we see as of late, and I always use that term. And what I mean by that is, you get a character like Soul, who is a damage dealing character, but he has heal capabilities to heal teammates alongside the damage. Faris is notoriously another character like that. Dagger technically is too. A2 has an ability that can do the same. And so the more you have these role compressions coming in, we saw it for a while with tanks going away and DPS characters becoming tankier. They didn't have the hate component, but they kind of replaced the role in a sense. And you're kind of seeing that now too with a lot of these supports. I do still think support's super valuable. I still think right now it's a question of durability for me at this point for many of these supports, that they naturally skew a little bit on the lighter side in terms of durability. They don't have the benefit of the damage dealers of as significant cast time reductions, that a lot of these damaging magic damage dealers, cast times are way down. Supports, you're basically forced into their cast time passive. None of the Esper nodes have support cast time down. It's all offensive cast time down. And so when you talk about like that deficiency, they never really caught up with the meta the same way some of the offensive characters did. And they're also, because of the point of some of these characters being heal bot supports. I did a video on this a while back on whether you should reincarnate supports or not. And the answer is likely yes and no in most instances. But the problem with a heal bot support that only heals is that you only get only certain attributes of reincarnation really help them. And it's kind of like the missile units. If you don't reincarnate any of your supports, they're always going to be a step behind the bar of the damage dealers and tanks that are. That the damage dealers will innately always get like 20 extra crit rate because your supports aren't reincarnated to get the crit evade to offset it. So that means that your support units take more crit damage because you're getting crit hit more often. And it means that you're not getting the support magic stat up high to offset the attack stat that the reincarnated damage dealer is getting. So if your Bradley gets an extra 180 attack, well, the healer should theoretically get 180 magic to offset the extra damage done. Like in perfect balance, that's how it would work. But a lot of these healers that only do pure healing, the return on investment isn't necessarily there. So like I think that's why from like an S and A tier perspective, where a lot of this is driven by like min maxing and reincarnations, top end play, that certain styles of characters and supports don't really work as a dedicated healer, but they absolutely still have a place. It's just a little bit harder to drop a unit that can do half of their job for them.
So it does definitely makes me interested to see like what is going to be their next take on the like 100 cost support focus unit, because we haven't seen one since Velis, right? Since that
I
point, it's been just lower.
think you're right.
I mean, I guess if we're counting Sylvie, I guess she came out after Velis, but she's
That's
a
true.
global unit.
That's true. Yeah, I think that's true.
It's an interesting thought though, just something I kind of saw that was happening organically while we were putting our tier list together. I was like, hey, the majority of those kind of supportive units are in those B and C tiers, just kind of trying to think about why that was.
Yep, totally. But yeah, that's everything we got right now. Obviously, very intrigued to see Oberon come out, what he brings to the table, and how close we are or not to evaluating him at a snapshot glance. I don't have high hopes personally. I think he's going to underwhelm. Um,
I kind of hope he's not good, so I don't feel the FOMO to want to pull him,
no,
because
same.
I want to save right now.
Me too. I have enough fire cast anyway that I don't think fire is my weakness. I don't think he really solves what I need either for this meta. Um, like I don't know. I don't know. we'll see. I need to see more A2 adoption to really feel pressured into pulling Oberon, because until then, like Vivi Helena, like we're still doing okay. Oberon's not the missing piece to unlocking that meta. We've already kind of figured that out.
Seems like he's kind of set up to do well against both A2 and the mages,
Right.
theoretically. But we'll have to actually see the full kit to have a good judge on it.
And then again, the meta is going to change in like a month anyway, so that's why I think it might be like too little, too late. If you know what I mean, we're already seeing Strike make kind of a little bit of resurgence there, and obviously like great sword teams, and which are slash oriented, but they have, I don't know, more than what he can handle from what I can tell. Like the AOE crush and the barrier breaks and the barrier seal, and yeah.
I was saying that he's probably going to have a big missile weakness, like a 10% missile weakness, just to artificially inflate the Catone sales coming in a
Absolutely.
couple of weeks.
You're so spot on. That's literally what's going to happen. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Well, oh man. Well, good. Well, that's it for now. Regardless, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. JB, good talking to you, man, as always. And we'll have a good week. We'll see you soon.
You too. See you next time.